Hi there, I'm Christine Zips, health rights advocate, patriot, and founder of Wired Schools and Zips Media. Today we have a very special guest, Patrick Wood. He will be joining me to talk about a very important topic, censorship. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a rise in frequency, intensity, intimidation, and aggression. And as a case in point, we'll be focusing on a recent incident here in Colorado where a suburban mom of 4 was surprised by the FBI in the morning while she was teaching her children, and they gained entry by battering ram. And this is just something worthy of discussion. So to set the scene on this particular case, I'd like to share with you a bit from a release Patrick sent out last week. They were at my home to intimidate me, to shut me up, because I was using my First Amendment rights to advocate, and they'll never be held accountable. Instead, they will criminalize this woman who has stood up. Those were the words of Sherronna Bishop, a terrified but determined suburban Colorado mother whose home was invaded by federal law enforcement on November 16th in what could be the first case of the promised Department of Justice crackdown on activist parents. Bishop has been a vocal activist for election integrity in her state, as well as a fixture at local school board meetings, often opposing the implementation of mask mandates for children and the inclusion of critical race theory in school curricula. According to Patrick Wood, these activities are what likely made her a target of a rogue DOJ. You'll find a link to this release along with other related links in the comments section below. For those of you unfamiliar with his impressive body of work, I'd like to share highlights from Patrick Wood's bio. He is a leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, and historic technocracy. He is executive director of Citizens for Free Speech, which is dedicated to preserving free speech and enabling citizens to exercise their rights as guaranteed by the United States Constitution. Patrick is the author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, and co-author of Trilaterals Over Washington, Volumes 1 and 2, with the late Anthony C. Sutton. Other books by Wood are Globalization and the Crucible of Global Banking, and Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order. Mr. Wood is a frequent speaker and guest on radio shows around the nation. His current research builds on trilateral commission hegemony, focusing on technocracy, transhumanism, and scientism, and how these are transforming global economics, politics, and religion. And now I'd like to extend a hearty welcome to Patrick Wood. Thank you so much for joining us. Been a huge fan and all of your goodies here. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm glad I could be on, discuss some of these things today.
Very good. So if you're ready to get going with that, how about we start with, was wondering, what was it about the Sherronna Bishop case that caught your attention?
Actually, it was a badge and a gun. As much as that, well, a battering ram was a big thing too.
Yes.
I followed the story of the school association, the nonprofit school association that sent a letter to the Attorney General several weeks ago, complaining that that school boards were being inundated by protesters who were really a national security threat and were making all kinds of hate speech remarks and so on. And they sent this letter to the AG saying, you need to do something about this to protect these poor, innocent, helpless little school boards from these angry mama bears. Well, I paraphrase, okay? And so immediately that news got out, and the Attorney General got drugged before Congress to explain himself. Okay, why have you entertained this, and you know, why have you sent this memo back to like the likes of the FBI to have them reclassify parents around the country as potential domestic terrorists? And he said, "Oh no, I was just wrong. That was a mistake." He backpedaled all over the place. And so he went away from his hearing kind of with his tail a little bit between his legs, but not really, because nothing changed. And, he said, "Oh, we're not going to allow that. We wouldn't, oh, no, we'd never use the FBI for such things, just ordinary citizens." Well, lo and behold, Sherronna had a knock on the door from the FBI. And they ended up breaking her door down and terrorizing her family. And this is a badge and a gun. This is not, they claimed that they were interested in some damage she might have done to what they call a protected computer. I have no idea what that is at this point. But it wasn't. There was no serious charges on the search warrant that like you set a pipe bomb to a senator or something like that. Nothing like that. No. And so she was left with nothing more than a feeling of intimidation and fear. And it's like, oh my gosh, what are they doing in my house? And they searched your house top to bottom. I never saw a picture of what happened, what it looked like after they got done searching. But usually when the FBI does a search, they typically turn drawers upside down and things like that. And it kind of tends to deconstruct your house, right? So I don't know if they did that to her or not. Maybe they just lifted stuff up and looked under. I have no idea. But just the idea that they searched your house completely and that they, asked you some questions, threatened you, with force. They did have her in handcuffs for a period of time, she said. And then they left, and they didn't charge her with anything. No crime. I don't think they took anything with them that they found, whatever they were looking for. But this was obviously, in my opinion, a spurious investigation by the FBI of a mother in Colorado who had made a habit of visiting various school boards with parents as well. She became an advocate for parents of school-age children. And so she would go and testify before school boards. And for a number of things, mask mandates being one, mandated vaccines being another, and critical race theory being taught. Another thing really was a hot button for her. And she has a website and she's pretty vocal, and pretty much every parent in Colorado probably knows who she is because they've ran into her somewhere along the way. So she was kind of visible, more so than just, Susie Jones, who never appeared on camera anywhere. She kind of had a reputation, and they picked on her. They picked her and said, "We'll use this one to make an example." And they did. This is the first time in my observation that the government has used physical force against people who are fully entitled to their free speech rights, to, like her, to say what she was saying. She broke no law. She just was speaking out, and that's what free speech is all about. And these school board, many of the school board people that we have now around the country do not believe in free speech. They don't believe in the Constitution, and they don't believe in the First Amendment. So in their mind, you have no right to speak. And if you criticize us, why, we're going to take action against you. And there has been more action since Sherronna's case, where a gun and a badge were used against just ordinary citizens trying to protect their children. And we always think, when you think of the FBI, you always used to think of criminals, like gangsters and the mafia and, really bad people. Absolutely. Serial killers. And, don't you have something better to do than to chase innocent mothers around?
Yeah, it seems like to me that they kind of used her as an example. Yes. And I watched the interview Steve Bannon did with her, was very strong, and she pretty much laid it out. And I understand they did handcuff her and her husband and kind of led their 18-year-old daughter up and down the stairs by her hoodie. And poor things, and the younger ones were naturally, they were all, frightened, of course. Yep. I think that's what it was all about. So It just seemed like that. And I noticed with her website, America's Mom, that she posted a live video this morning. I didn't get to listen to it all, but it had to do with a local pastor in her area that I think they were coming after him and even threatening him with incarceration. Don't know what the apparent crime was,
Wow.
but I intend to go back there and see what that's going on, but it's just amazing. I mean, I'm an activist. I'm a homeschooler and of our next door neighbor, 8-year-old. And I speak out. I have a little bit of but I think she has a whole lot more of a local celebrity status about her. So it's just really a darn shame, but I really admire her for standing up. And I understand she's going to join with Tina Peters tomorrow in front of the courthouse in Grand Junction doing a freedom rally, which is awesome. And we're going to be, this will air after it happens because it's going to be tomorrow, but I guess that would be a great thing. I hope she has a wonderful turnout. So that would be great. And I wanted to ask you, do you think the FBI should have been involved? Obviously, you don't. No. But, how might they have better handled the situation given that they were?
Yeah, no, this is a completely spurious activity by the FBI, in my opinion. I think most legal scholars, I'm not one, but I think legal scholars would agree. The FBI did what they did, but it completely breaks with precedents. They're supposed to be chasing felony level criminals. And they're supposed to be, in the case of where they operate with Homeland Security, they're supposed to be chasing legitimate terrorists and people who want to blow things up and kill people and stab them to death, that sort of thing. Right. And this clearly was none of that, absolutely none of that. This is a politically motivated attack against a political opponent of the president and the far left, whatever regime. I won't even give it the grace to call it the Democrat regime. Okay, there's far left wackos who are after. They figured out they can use the political establishment against their enemies. And that's what they've done. That's exactly what they've done here.
It seems just a bit that cut and dried. I agree. And I mean, as you know, Sherronna had no criminal background. I don't think she's even shoplifted a tube of lipstick or anything. And as I understand, she's been active along with Tina Peters, the county clerk, in looking into election integrity, transparency, etc. So, which is within their right. And Tina's and everything, they've done nothing wrong. And it's just amazing. And I wondered, would you, Patrick, consider the FBI as a law enforcement or political policy enforcement agency?
Well, today, their charter says they're supposed to be a policing type of an agency for crimes that don't fit the local venue, right? You have sheriffs, you have county police, you have city police, and you have state police, troopers, stuff like that are supposed to take adequate care of crimes that occur within the state or within the city, the municipality. The FBI has usually been reserved for crimes that cross state lines or that somehow are just outside the jurisdiction of, maybe they're federal crimes and they're outside the jurisdiction of a local venue. That's when the FBI is supposed to step in. This has none of those markers at all on it. They stepped into it because they could. If they had had a constitutional sheriff in that county, it was Mesa County, I think it was, the sheriff would have said, "You need to leave now and get out of my county because you're not going to serve this. You get out of her home and you're toast." And they would have left, by the way. They would have immediately turned tail and driven their little black SUVs right out of the county without touching a hair on her head.
Absolutely. That was going to be my next question. Do you think a constitutional sheriff could have intervened? But, I mean. And
they should have.
Yeah.
It's a shame to anybody elected to office like a sheriff to misuse the office. Talk about a political weapon. To misuse the office of the last elected office, law enforcement officer in the land, the county sheriff, for that sheriff to turn corrupt and use his office as a political weapon against people in his county is absolutely unconscionable. It's egregious. It's just offensive on every single level.
Totally, could not agree more. And I had the privilege of interviewing Constitutional Sheriff Richard Mack last year, and I joined his posse group, and we are in the process of reaching out to all the counties in the U.S. to determine, take a survey to figure out if they are constitutional sheriffs, and if they are or not, they get a black pin or they get a white pin on the map. And and it's going to be exposed. So I think that's kind of a worthwhile thing that we're kind of
working. Absolutely it is. And for too long, people have ignored the county sheriff as being an important office in their community.
Kind of forgotten. I don't know why. Do you think it's because they're county jurisdiction and not local or city or state?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's just a lot of bluff. And on the other hand, I suppose it's that some of these sheriffs around the country have been acting so poorly for decades that people just figure, there's just one more run of the mill bagger.
They're just a Barney Fife, right?
Well, sort of, but when you see the county sheriff doing stuff like the city chief of police does, which is very political in many cases, you just shake your head. It's phooey, who needs it? And you don't pay any attention to them. But there have been some great examples of county sheriffs standing up that really understood what they were all about.
Absolutely.
And pushing back on the feds, and they were, in every case, they were successful. The feds have nothing to say.
There's some great stories out there, and I love to focus on that as well. And, with this Sherronna Bishop, would you consider this an isolated incident? Or do you think that's maybe the start of a snowballing effect?
Well, we're certainly going to have to wait and see if it's going to continue like this. There was a case in Texas where two fathers were arrested by a gun and a badge, but the gun and the badge was attached to the school district directly. In other words, they had somehow had the authority and funding to create their own police force for the school district. I'm sure that would be like, guards that would stand guard in the schools and stuff like that to protect students against whatever mass shooters. But the school board saw fit to use their police force to arrest these two dads, and they passed them off to, I think, to the county sheriff because they don't have any teeth in there. They arrest somebody, they don't have any teeth to do anything about it. They don't have a jail to put them.
Really?
So they passed them off. And again, the county sheriff should have stood up and said, "Get out of here. You're not doing this. What are you doing over there? What are you a bunch of mall cops or what? It's like, what trying to play police on us here?
Go get some donuts, right?
That's right. Go get some donuts. Here's 50 cents. Go buy yourself a donut.
There you go. Oh my. Oh, that's amazing. And I've been, so much of my focus has been on global problems causing harm, especially to children. And, looking into the school issues, I did an interview with Alex Newman about the hidden high costs of public schools. And we just covered the gamut, critical race theory and Common Core, et cetera. And I think so much behind the scenes with schools, maybe you would agree, is the National Teachers Trade Union. I mean, what a bully force they are, I don't know, but do you think that this type of situation might be held up to serve as a lesson for other potential terrorist activist parents? Like, you better mind your P's and Q's or we're coming after you, That's
clearly the message, and whether it will work or not is unknown. I don't know. It may rile up the angry mama bears even more across the country, where they say not just no, but hell no, and they really stand up and fight twice as hard.
Right.
On the other hand, there will be some timid ones who say, "Man, I'm not going to tangle with this crowd.
Oh, sure.
They're too big. They're too powerful. I don't want that on my record." That sort of stuff. So it's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I'll say one thing that really, I think, really stands out from the Sherronna case and from what happened in Texas. And that is Pandora's box has been opened for violence. And I'll make the observation that once violence begins, it never retreats on its own. Never in history. No criminal, no political force, no revolution ever used power and retreated on its own accord.
Mhm.
It had to be beaten back by either military or law enforcement or in some cases just people. It had to be beaten back into retreat until the violent people gave up being violent.
Mhm.
Now, we have in our country right now, especially as we're talking right now about this, violence is raising its ugly head in ways that you could not have dreamed 6 months ago. The Sherronna case is one, and there are some others like that around that are just amazing. The rating of Project Veritas
James O'Keefe, right? Mhm.
was a big nothing burger.
Right.
It was politically motivated to get a hold of his sources and his resources and donors and stuff to Project Veritas. They charged him with no crime, and the crime that they put in the search warrant, potential crime, was so unbelievable that most people wouldn't understand it because they've never heard of what's called a misprision of felony.
The diary of Biden's daughter.
Well, it was over is a stupid diary. That should be a local police issue. You lose your diary, go to the police and report it missing. Okay, you don't call the FBI to investigate.
It's just absurd.
It really is. But here's the thing with misprision of treason. What it basically states is that if you witnessed a felony taking place and did not report it, you could be guilty of misprision of felony. Now, and that means you have to know what a felony is. But if you witnessed a felony taking place and didn't report it to a judge or the police, then you'd be charged with this extra crime. But before they could even consider attacking you for misprision of felony, they have to go convict somebody of a felony of which you witnessed them doing it, right? So it has to go to court. The guy has to be convicted. He's in jail now. He committed a felony. He's in jail. And then they come back and look at you and say, well, you were right next to him when he did that thing, whatever it was, and you didn't speak up. So we're charging you with misprision of felony. Okay, that's the charge that they were trying to throw in the search warrant to Project Veritas. No crime had been committed. That's an admission that no crime had been committed because no felony has been committed or even acknowledged. And yet they tried to, intimidate him by saying, if we ever determine that a crime was committed down the road, we're going to come back and get you. It's like,
right. Well, I mean, to me,
there's nothing to it. It's cotton candy. It's a nothing burger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thank you for explaining that. I think that's very helpful to explain that term. I think a lot of folks, including myself, will appreciate learning that. Okay. But I was thinking with James O'Keefe, and I've been watching a lot of his work, and I admire his work as a really hard-hitting, honest, well-researched journalist, and bringing out all these whistleblowers with great chaos, as you say, of 2020, 21, right. And I'm thinking they're thinking, we got to find a way to quell this guy. I don't know. It seems like they were just trying to scare him but I mean, I don't think they may know what they're dealing with because he's not going away.
Well, he won't go away. And again, it was a warning shot for him, I think, too. It was really maybe meant more for other people, other investigative journalists around the country than for him.
Could be.
But nevertheless, it was the use of violence, inappropriate use of violence. The cat is out of the bag on violence now. It's being used by the FBI against citizens that have done nothing wrong. And you have now, aside from all the local law enforcement issues we could talk about, you have now flash mobs robbing big box stores in malls and in high-end areas around the country, where anywhere from 50 to 100 mobsters, mob gang members, whatever, with hammers and crowbars and whatever, break into a big store, gut it in a matter of minutes, and take off with the loot. Nobody can stop them. You'd almost need a militia out there to stop them. There's so many of them, there'd be absolute carnage. But now I think I think there's been probably at least a dozen such incidences just in the last 10 days. This is a bad trend because violence is out of the bag. That's what started my thinking about this, right? The issue is violence going to be a thing now? Yes, right. It does.
And I understand that, like you had mentioned as well, is that there's been a rise where censorship used to be a little more quiet and passive. And over the last, 6 months to 2 years, it's been increasingly violent. And I understand that they're running police trainees through militarized training.
Yes.
That they're like, oh my gosh, they're coming on as guerrilla, warfare type stuff. And it seems a little excessive for, I don't know.
It certainly is. And this, of course, this is the dangerous part of it, is that it doesn't have any business being on American soil whatsoever. Every community has its own police force. Every community has its own, force of power available, whether it be rifles or guns or whatever they need to take care of local problems. We don't need a military coming after our own citizens. And this is what happened a long time ago, even in the early Obama administration, when all of this excess military equipment started to be donated to local police departments. Humvees and carriers with machine guns on top and stuff like that.
Nothing to see here. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is what was used in Afghanistan and Iraq. And, the body armor that goes along with it. And of course, the training videos here's how you use all this stuff, here's how you look mean and nasty when you go out to raid somebody.
Do they think that that many of us are totally ignorant and not seeing what they're doing in plain sight and asking questions? Like, yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder. We're so involved with our lives.
I know. Well, for all the people that have questioned that along the way, they always throw out plausible deniability.
There you go.
Always. Well, you're reading this wrong. Well, maybe it's not that way everywhere. Whatever the case is, always something comes out that on why it's okay. Probably, you need to wait 6 months and see. And then 6 months, people forget what they were talking about 6 months ago.
Right. Don't bother your pretty head about that. It's going to be okay. We would never do anything like that.
Right.
So crazy. And with Sherronna, do you think she was targeted or, we kind of covered that, but.
Well, it was her address on the search warrant.
There you go. Well, I guess that answers that question pretty much. Yeah. So
what kind of a court did they go to get the search warrant? I have no idea. I'll say one thing. It was the FBI has offices in Colorado. Okay. Mm-hmm. They maintain offices there, which indicates, and I didn't see the search warrant, but it indicates that the search warrant was issued from a Colorado court, a federal court in Colorado. Mm-hmm. It couldn't have been a local court, like a state court.
Right.
It has to be a federal court that issued the search warrant. Nobody so far has said who that was or what their rationalization was to issue it. There has to be some compelling reason for a judge to issue a no-knock search warrant.
Right. And I from the interview, I was a little confused. It seemed as though Sherronna didn't seem to think they had a real search warrant. She said they kind of flashed a few pieces of paper and they had the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud included on that. And I wondered if that might be a tie-in to her looking into, along with Clerk Peters, about the election integrity.
Yeah. She definitely needs to have somebody that really maybe understands this whole process better than she does. I did sense some confusion with her as well. And that would be understandable on one hand, because when you're terrorized like that, you don't think straight. I mean, you're going to just your head's going to be spinning. And I'm sure she never had any contact with the FBI before this. So her perception of, let's look at it like an accident at the corner of Elm and 6th Street, right?
Right.
She looks at the accident right now that took place there, metal, smoke, all that kind of stuff. and trying to observe the crime scene, okay, she's going to be the worst witness in the world because she was in it. She was involved in it.
Absolutely.
So she remembers is probably going to be wrong. There needs to be another investigator that really understands the stuff, come alongside of her and examine the evidence and, really go through it with her and then bring it to the public and say, okay, this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know that. And certainly if the FBI did have a search warrant, it is public information. And so that could be discovered through a FOIA request, if nothing else. Maybe
Yes.
Project Veritas needs to get a jump on this, right?
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Pat, in a related instance, I think I mentioned to you, we're helping to homeschool our a friend's 8-year-old daughter. She's doing great. And I just came out of school with her, actually. So, but we're connected with an umbrella school, and the director of that recently informed us that we're in Colorado, and the Department of Public Health and Environment has issued a notice that they're moving to require immunization records for students, even homeschoolers. And further, any child not in compliance shall be denied access. Shall be denied attendance, in accordance with the law. And the parents pulled their child from government schools to homeschool, believing they should be protected from such illegal mandates, medical mandates. How do you believe they can get by with this? Mm-hmm. Same way everybody else does, right?
There's another trend that is very disturbing and dangerous in America, has been going on for quite some time, and that is the trend of lawlessness. Lawlessness, for a person to be lawless, does not mean that they're a lawbreaker. Like you drive down the street at 50 in a 25 zone, you get stopped by a policeman, he gives you a ticket, you say, "I'm sorry, sir," whatever, I'll go pay my fine. You're a lawbreaker. Sorry, you got a ticket, but you're a lawbreaker. Hmm. A lawless person has no regard for the law. They do not recognize the law as even applying to them, and they refuse to comply. And we see this right now, top to bottom, throughout our country. And it started well before, I'm sure it started well before Biden took office, but Biden has perfected this as an art form. I'll give you a case in point. He states there's going to be a national mandate on employers employers that have over 100 employees, that everybody is going to be mandated for a vaccine, and all federal employees. Then along comes the federal court and says, no, egregious violation of the Constitution here, you may not proceed. And then another court comes out separately, says the same thing. That was actually a higher court because they appealed it. So nope, absolutely unconstitutional. What you just requested, you cannot do it. You're forbidden to do it. The court spoke correctly, I believe. Biden turns around and says to all the people around the country, all the employers, all the contractors and everything else, just ignore what the court said and do it anyway.
There you go.
Now, that's lawlessness. That's not being a lawbreaker. The first thing you want to say, you're breaking a law, President Biden. No, he's not. He's a lawless person. That's much more dangerous than a lawbreaker, because you can always collar a lawbreaker and change their behavior by punishing them with prison or a fine or embarrassment or whatever. But a lawless person can do nothing other than be lawless, whether you put them in jail or not. They will continue to be lawless the very day they walk out of confinement. This is what's happening around the country today. In San Francisco, it's illegal to nab a shopholder, a shoplifter that goes into a store, blatantly picks up some goods, walks out the door. The store is forbidden to do anything to curtail that person, to arrest them, to detain them, even to call the police, okay? That's a lawless society. That's a lawless person. And these stores take it to the extent where Walgreens closed 8 stores recently because they couldn't hack. They couldn't take it anymore. All the goods being stolen right out of their store. They could do nothing about it. They just said, we're out of here. We're not going to, San Francisco, you can go buy yourself from 7-Eleven. This used to getting held up all the time or something. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. The Wild Wild West, I think, was tame compared to this. That's just amazing.
In
And
many ways, you're right.
I read today that I believe Biden, I refuse to call him president, but he made the announcement, I believe, that he's pulling back on the mandates for the jab for all the, and I won't call them vaccine because they're not, but they're mandating the jab for employees. They're going to put that off until after the first of the year, so I don't know. It's just amazing. But, with the National School Board, had you heard that they apologized for labeling parents as domestic terrorists? And the unethical labeling has set a dangerous precedent. And do you think that this has helped justify the raid on Sherronna Bishop?
It caused it. It made it possible, totally, top to bottom. Mm-hmm. It gave the minute that the Attorney General spoke, it opened the door for the FBI to be involved. Mm-hmm. Period.
Yep. And I'm absolutely I mean, I thought that was really rich, though. I hadn't heard until recently that they apologized. So that's really big of them. But
it won't change their behavior. That's the problem.
I know. It's, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
In Sherronna's interview with Steve Bannon, he said, quote, "If this type of behavior stands, we're finished as a country. This is what illegitimate regimes do to terrorize people." And would you agree with that statement? I know the answer to that, but I wondered if you wanted to speak to that.
Well, I do agree with it. And, I'm sure there's got to be something that I disagree with Bannon on somewhere along the way, but by and large, for most of his positions, he's spot on. He has a unique ability to see through, as he calls it, see through the noise and see the signal. And I think he's got this exactly right. There was a great article that I recently posted on technocracy.news, as well as on citizensforfreespeech.org, that had to do with a concept called mass formation. It's like mass hypnosis. And I'll develop a little bit to get to the question.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I think I asked you if it'd be okay if we talked about that.
Yes, it really applies here to what we're talking about.
Great.
The guy who came up with this idea is a professor of clinical psychology in Belgium. Yes. And he speaks fluent English, fortunately, so we can understand him. I don't understand any language from Europe at all, but he speaks very good English. And as a clinical psychologist and also a statistician, which is kind of an odd combination, but he has a master's in statistics as well as clinical psychology, a PhD. And so he's been studying the whole thing. The whole pandemic has been coming along, whatever. Something didn't make sense to him. He couldn't make any sense out of the statistical models. He said, they're really cracked. So he applied his knowledge of clinical psychology to the problem and say, something's wrong here. What's wrong? And he came up with the concept, or at least he explored and developed the concept of what he calls mass formation. Psychosis. It's a psychological condition where society all of a sudden develops its own circular community of thinking and goes completely off the rails. It's kind of like hypnosis, where somebody can be hypnotized individually and made to cluck like a chicken or go into surgeries. Some people that are hypnotized, you can cut their body, you can do surgery on them and they won't feel the pain.
Isn't that amazing?
Because they're hypnotized and the mind is shut off to it. This is the concept of mass formation. And he goes through the 4 things that are required for mass formation to take place. They're very kind of commonsensical on one part. The first thing, you just jump right off the page. It says the central condition is the lack of societal bonding. In other words, social isolation on a mass scale. Okay, here we have face masks. Here we have social distancing. Here we have shutting down the schools. Who needs social interaction? Students. Duh. Shut them down, make them stay home, deprive them of the socialization that they might need. Don't let them see their friends, their buds, and so on, maybe online, but nowhere else. The conditions go on, but in every case, we can see in society what's happening right now. is a product of the whole COVID debacle for the last 2 years. They have brought these policies to bear intentionally, as we know now, of course, all of which combined to create this mass formation, transformation of society on a global basis, where now 30 to 40%, maybe as many as 40%, are completely disjointed from reality. And they're stuck over here in mask mania, COVID mania, hysterical behavior, worship of vaccine, taking vaccines, even though their neighbor next door died 3 days ago after getting the shot. They still go out and get the shot. Yes, sir, I'll get the shot. This behavior is just totally disjointed. But having said that, what he brings out at the end of most of his talks is that the only preventative from mass formation taking place to the point of serious danger to society, the only impediment is free speech. And that was a little bit of a shock to me. I hadn't thought about it that way before. But as long as people have the ability to speak, like you and I are speaking right now, Sherronna was speaking, other people, Project Veritas is speaking. As long as we have the ability to exercise some measure of free speech, these nutcases on this side of the fence will be prevented from taking action on their mass formation or as a result of their mass formation. It's a preventative. It's like, putting salt on the bacon. It prevents, further deterioration. And here's his logic behind this, and I think it's impeccable. And we have to remember, the Europeans understand totalitarianism in a way Americans don't. They're culturally sensitive to it. They had Hitler, they had Lenin and Stalin. They've had other local dictators that were just horrible, killed bunches of people. They understand what it means to have totalitarianism take over and what it does when it does. Well, here's what this guy brings out from Belgium.
They lived it. Yeah.
He says, the minute free speech stops, the minute is conquered for a totalitarian takeover, the minute free speech stops is when the killing starts. That's when genocide starts. That's the point of inflection that opens up the door for mass genocide of a population. We in America can't conceive of, like the Bolshevik Revolution, of 30 to 60 million people being killed. That would be a fifth of our population. But they experienced it, and they understand it. Free speech is the only defense against total carnage in our country and around the world, for other countries as well. But we live here, right? So we're concerned about America. The only thing left to keep this carnage from taking hold in America and allowing genocide to take place is that we have and maintain free speech. That's what makes it so critically important. And I want to say, Steve Bannon gets this. He does, absolutely positively. He sees this. We didn't compare notes, by the way. He got there on his own, but he's a strategist and he's a good one. He says, no, every revolution in history, as soon as the perpetrators are free to do what they want to do without any repercussion whatsoever, they just go ahead and do it.
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they? Yeah. Nobody to stop them. Nobody to put the finger in their chest and say, you can't do that. You're wrong. We'll block you from doing that. Mm-hmm. But once the resistance is gone, all hell's going to break loose. And I just say that because it's an existential issue right now that we keep free speech alive in America. Yeah. And that people stand up like Sherronna. Don't just go to the school board meeting. Open up your window and shout it into the streets.
Right? Yeah. And I'm so glad you're speaking about this. Who got my attention to this mass formation psychosis type of hypnosis was Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of mRNA vaccine. And he spoke very well on that, I thought. And he was saying that, when people so oftentimes, when the mass society focused on usually one single thing, like the mass chaos of 2020. They're living in fear if they're watching the lies on mainstream. And that it seems almost like a little Stockholm syndrome comes in, where they're loving their captor, and anyone who comes up against them in opposition to that, they get attacked, because they've got this, they're banded together and they're strong in this position, and they're not moving. But, Malone said, forget about trying to educate them. You can show them all these white papers and studies till you're blue in the face. They ain't changing their mind. And his position is a way around that is to say, if you continue with this, you're bringing about a greater threat. Like, for example, forcing your children, their babies age 5, like Dr. David Martin said. He said, this isn't just one of the cases that we have before us that is a problem. He said, it is the only problem. They are murdering our babies with these force jabs. But, he said, if you bring that to their attention, that could maybe chink away at that resolve.
Yes.
How do you feel about his theory on that?
Well, this is what the clinical psychologist in Belgium brought up. His name is Matthias Desmond.
Yes.
And he's a professional in this field. I can't say it. I don't want to just call it a theory, because history is history. History is not a theory.
Of course.
People have a theory of history, I'm sure, but history, the fact of the matter is, it is what it is, right? And he brings up much of this, and what he talks about, even as he kind of says, well, this is what I've come up with. It's a little bit more than that. I mean, he's looking at actual, real history.
I think he's quite humble.
Well, I think he probably is too. He's an academic, and he's very thoughtful, and he chooses his words well.
Right.
But what he concludes, and I've listened to quite a bit of his material before I posted this article that was written by my friend Dr. Joseph Mercola on citizensforfreespeech.org. What the idea of the evolution of a totalitarian society, like where we're headed, and I believe this is technocracy, by the way, I'll just say that, but I'll use totalitarian because people kind of understand that a little bit that are listening to this.
Right.
Headed towards a totalitarian society, when it gets close to the end of crushing free speech, there is always a scapegoat that is identified by the perpetrators. Always. And who's the scapegoat today that's being identified? Well, it's the unvaxxed, the non-vaccinated people.
Pandemic of the unvaxxed.
The people, that's right. The pandemic of the unvaxxed is those evil killers.
Oh, yes.
Those thoughtless enemies of humanity that refuse to get vaccinated to save my grandmother, whatever. Right. They are the enemy. And we've heard such phraseology already come out. Those deniers deserve to be punished. We've heard that.
Very strong. You're right.
Very strong. And, if they had a way to punish them right now, they would punish them mercilessly. It hasn't happened yet because free speech is still alive and they simply cannot get away with it at this point. But the scapegoat has been identified in America. You have the anti-vaxxers, the non-vaxxers. You have the children now as well. And he brings out that in every case in the last 150 years, the children are always the ones made to suffer first. Always. This fits in with the history of revolutions, the totalitarian revolution. But as they get to the point of that point of inflection where the free speech is gone, they can do whatever they want to do. The killing that starts is always directed against that scapegoat. Whatever that scapegoat is, doesn't matter what it is. It could be people who have blonde hair. And there's been crazy scapegoats in history, like the witch trials in Europe. women of all nature were grabbed. You're a witch. We're going to burn you at the stake. And they did. It's like, what? How can, there's no way to tell that, 2/3 of the women in your town are witches, and let's just kill them, arbitrarily kill them. There's always that scapegoat group.
Excellent
now we have
analogy.
Case. That's what we have now.
Right.
Okay. Who did Hitler have? Who were his scapegoats? The Jews. Mm-hmm. And the gypsies and blacks and the crippled, the undesirable people that were crippled or mentally, incompetent or whatever. He had others, but mostly it was the Jews. They were the scapegoat that he used to commit genocide. What about the Bolshevik Revolution? Well, they killed anybody that had money initially. Anybody that had money in Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution was drug out in the street and shot. Didn't matter what they believed. They could have been the best people in the world for the communist revolution. No, you got money, you take them out, you're dead. Well, you could go on and look at every revolution in history like that and say, who were the scapegoat that was pre-identified, and then when they had the opportunity, they committed mass genocide against that people group. It's happened in China. It's happened in Cambodia, for sure. It's happened in some countries in Africa. It's always the same MO. So we're headed down a path with this mass formation thing right now, where we know that mass formation is already a real thing in society. We see it all over the planet. We can be thankful in a sense that Hitler's genocide was local to Europe. It wasn't planetary. Neither was the Bolshevik Revolution. Neither was the Chinese Revolution. They were limited to a continent. What we're dealing with today, however, is a global totalitarian takeover. Never had that before in history. That would imply that whenever this genocidal movement really gets steam, it's going to be global in nature. And we won't be probably talking in terms of 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 million people. We'll probably be talking in terms, ultimately, perhaps of hundreds of millions of people that could die globally because of this. Mass formation is the most dangerous societal thing that ever could happen to any country, nation, people group, whatever, because eventually it will snap into irrationality, take that focus group, the evildoers, and just simply say, the only way we can solve our problems is by killing them. I don't like the sound of that. I hate to even say that. I hate to even suggest that. I'm just telling you what Matthias said.
And I believe I listened to that last night, and it might be relevant to fit this short quote in from the Americana Encyclopedia. Censorship that hinders peaceable opposition to the government in the short run creates the long run danger of violent opposition. And I think that's just, it speaks to what you were saying pretty much there. So, do you have any thoughts? Where do we go from here? How do we stand up? What can we do today? I always like to throw in the solutions if we can, but how do we fix this hot mess?
I like what Desmond says at the end. And this was kind of a little bit of a surprise to me, but I like what he says. He said, the only antidote to mass formation is more speech, more free speech. That's the answer. More guns is not the answer. No. More speaking is the answer, because every time somebody exercises free speech, they're acting as a deterrent to this formation crowd that's already lost to that crowd. It'll keep them at bay as long as we have free speech. We need to speak more, not less. In the case of somebody like Sherronna, we need to take courage from that and say, I'm going to double down. I'm going to double down now, and I'm going to be even more vocal about my beliefs and about things that are right and things that are morally on the high ground. I'm going to speak out about those things, and I don't care what the consequences are. If I get shunned, if I get bullied, whatever, so be it. Right. But I'm going to speak and let my words be known. And this has to be an attitude grabbed by everybody that's not in that formation group. You're not going to pull those people out automatically. They won't come out. We're not, like you already said, they're really into it. They're really embedded in it. The people that are the fence sitters, probably 30 to 40% in the middle, they're afraid to say anything against the formation crowd, but they don't really want to go where you and I are. So they're sitting on a fence. They're trying to play both ends against the middle, protect their jobs, just kind of get along to go along. Those are the people that we can still talk to. And they can be encouraged off their fence to say, you need to get off the fence.
I agree with you. I think Matthias used the figure last night of 31% might be among the ones who are in the mass formation group. And I was surprised that it was that low. I don't know. When I go out without my mask and thanks to you, I have this, with.
Oh, great.
Yes. And by the way, Pat, I wanted to share that you didn't hear part of my entry, but we're including links to your websites and photos of your 4 books and all of your great brochures and, all this great stuff here and your ninja training from Mary Baker and all great stuff.
We're to the point right now where people need to steel their mind. When I use that phrase, steel the mind, I mean, you need to get resolve in your brain that whatever role these people want you to play, simply do not play that role. Just commit to it. Do you say, all you people saying, "Oh, listen, right now, say it." Repeat after me. Right? I will not play the role that they give me to play. If they tell you you must wear a mask, say, no, I'm not going to wear a mask. If they tell you most get a shot, that's your role. No, I'm not going to get a shot. If they tell you you must allow us to take over your children's education, yada, yada, and we know better. No, I'm not going to play that role. Sorry. No. Just don't play the role. It doesn't mean you have to go out and protest on the street and, make all kinds of ruckus. But at the very least, don't play the role that they give you to play. That throws a big monkey wrench into their operation immediately.
Absolutely.
They can't cope with that. They just can't cope with it. The parent that shows up at every school board meeting, even if the parent says nothing, even if the parent does nothing more than just hold up a little sign says, "I don't comply." If that's all they did, they would send a message to the people that are looking out from behind the panel chairs. Somebody in our audience does not comply.
Yes, I agree with that. And, on the same note, do you have any special message for those who are paid to censor and fact check? Oh, don't get you started, right? But this is a PG audience, right?
Yes, I know. So the whole censorship thing right now, here's my take on it. We've given way too much talk time to censorship by the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world. And here's why I say it. Nobody can take away your right to free speech, period. Nobody can. That doesn't mean they can't throw your book in the fire, but, or whatever, but nobody can take away your right to free speech. And over the years, over the decades, Americans have had this crazy idea, a misperception of what free speech means in the first place, where it just generally applies to me, but all those, the journalists and the radio people or whatever, that's where all that free speech stuff takes place. There needs to be a personal involvement with free speech. And I liken it sometimes to a tree falling in the forest when nobody's around. You know that argument. Does it make a sound? And there have been countless debates and arguments over that. But I'd ask the same question about free speech. Do you have the right? Can you claim to have free speech if you do not exercise personally free speech? And the answer for the most part is no, you don't. because the First Amendment is different than all the other amendments. It doesn't grant you any rights, but it does point out that you have the unalienable rights to do those things. The framers believe those things were given by God. They can't be taken away by men. That's why the First Amendment starts out saying, Congress shall make no law. They were just telling Congress, keep your filthy, stinking mitts off of our unalienable rights. That's all it says. But they're ours to have and hold and possess because they were not given by men. They can't be taken away by men. So if you want to claim that you have free speech rights, but you're not exercising your free speech rights, then what good is it to you? It isn't. Nothing. It's just an esoteric mental gymnastic thing you're doing in your own mind, tricking yourself into thinking you've done something when you've done nothing. This is the problem that Americans have right now. They've had for a long time. But people need to stand up and speak up. Like, this is true. We can see this now. Our director of training, Mary Baker, says, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are what's on the menu for dinner.
Love it.
That's it.
Amen. Yeah.
Stand up, speak up, don't shut up.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many great quotes out there to that effect. And yes, that is so strong. Pat, thank you so much for what you do. And, you just, I can't thank you enough for all of your work out there. And so I just wondered if you had any closing comments. We really appreciate everyone listening and wanted to say that if you find value in the message today, please subscribe and share and like, and that will help, further the message of wonderful folks who donated their time like Patrick with us today. So that is just great. We're going to run this through a short edit and get it posted and published on YouTube. I'm also setting up on BitChute. Speaking of free speech, I want to make sure it doesn't get taken down. And even on Facebook, they put me in timeout for the next 90 days for telling too much truth. They shared that I shared posts like about Dr. Carrie Madej and Dr. Peter Mercola and sharing information about that. And apparently that was not what they wanted their people to hear. So I'm finding ways about posting anyway. I took a screen share of the restrictions and why they've put me in timeout. I said, this is what they're doing. I said, if you're getting this message, or if you have something similar, let me know. And a lot of my friends said, oh yeah, I hear you. And one of them said, he said, every time I get censored, I just get louder, so that's great. But, we just have to do that. And speaking of FB, I understand that today at midnight they switch over to Meta. They're not Facebook anymore. They're META. Meta.
Meta, yeah.
So for whatever that means, but oh well, big deal there, right?
Well, it is. That's a good topic for another discussion. It's really going to be huge.
It absolutely is huge. You betcha. Yes. And just speaking on that really quickly, I don't know if you caught Dr. David Martin's presentation at the latest Red Pill about a week or so ago. He came out and named everybody. He said they want you to think it's Pfizer and Moderna and all of these other bad actors and even Bill Gates and blah blah blah. But it's these other companies that you've never heard of that are pulling the strings. So he, oh my gosh, he laid out a slide that was the COVID orchestra, named all the names, including cellist Yo-Yo Ma, which blew my socks off. So I thought that was interesting. But Patrick, I could talk with you forever. Any closing words you'd like to share with us?
Well, I suppose the only thing I can say in the end of it is have courage. Take courage. Don't let anybody cheat you out of life and cheat you out of your enjoyment of life. Exactly. That only comes with taking courage. And people are so they're so browbeaten into depression and into being down at the mouth at everything. And there's a lot to be down at the mouth at. Let's face it, there is.
Of course.
But there are people who run away from conflict. and there are people who run toward conflict. And the people who run toward conflict are always the ones that end up saving the day. Those are the military forces in World War II who ran towards the enemy, not running away from the enemy. Those have been the great political battles of our history, those who ran toward the fight, not away from the fight.
There you go.
And we're at that point today where we need to resolve in our mind, are we going to be cowards and run from the conflict because we don't like it for whatever reason? Or are we going to be, I hesitate to say true Americans, but are we going to be cowards, or are we going to be heroes and heroines who run toward the battle to engage the enemy? And I think right now there's no debate on what kind of people we should be. But if we do not run towards the conflict and engage this enemy with everything we have, we will eventually end up losing everything we've fought for in America. Many will end up losing their very lives, and everybody will end up losing their possessions. It's inconceivable as it happened in America, but right now, all the signs are there. And that means if there's ever a time in our history, it means now is the time to engage this enemy, take them on your terms, not their terms, but take them on and beat them back where they belong. For those that can be saved, pull them out of the fire. For those that can't be saved, move on. Just don't worry about them. There's plenty of other people that need to hear what we have to say. And so courage is the first thing I have to say. If you don't have it, you're already lost right where you stand. You'll be no good for anybody, and you'll end up being a weight to somebody. So I hope this speaks to a lot of Americans. I pretty routinely will tell people this is what they need to do. How many people listen, I don't know. But I think it's a truism. I don't think it's just Pat Wood saying this. I think you could look back at history and say anybody that saw what was going on anywhere said this is what we need to do. You want to keep what you got, keep your country, you better stand up and fight for it.
Absolutely, Pat. Very well said. And I'd just like to add just a very minimal thing just to tap off on that is that I truly believe that we are all here in this point in time for a reason, part of a sacred contract or whatever you want to call about it. We're here now, and we cannot be looking for someone else, some government, something else, big brother, whatever, to fix it. We need to stand in our truth and work locally and identify our tribe, find out who are around us, who will have our back, and gain momentum, right? Together is better, and we'll stand stronger for it. And, with your wonderful group with CFFS is to sign up for your group and attend are you still having was it Monday night meetings with Mary Baker?
We're done with that training. It's all available on, we have it recorded and we're delivering it through our website. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, I highly recommend that. And also, that's great. And we're sharing all sorts of related links below on that and some graphics. So, and we're going to be ending with a wonderful quote about free speech and freedom at the end of this video that you'll see later. So, Pat, you'll see some parts that you haven't seen before, and I hope you're pleased with it as well, ultimately. So, thank you for being such a wonderful guest. You make me want to be a better interviewer, and I really appreciate your helping me hone my skills.
My pleasure. Glad to help.
Thank you so much. Bye for now, everyone.